hour before dawn in Doha. The night shift leave while the day shift arrive. It's a 24-hour operation for the 1.5 million migrant workers here from Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, India and the Philippines, as Qatar prepares for 2022 and the most controversial World Cup yet. At about the same time, 2,000 miles away, a coffin arrives at Kathmandu airport. It contains the body of a Nepali construction worker killed in Doha. Bodies of migrant workers arrive in Nepal from the region at the rate of one every second day. But the work must go on. Hundreds of foreign companies were involved in a £200 billion building bonanza to include stadiums, hotels, shopping malls and road and rail links. Here, the Mushaireb complex in the centre of the city is said to be the largest construction site in the world. But little of that money appears to be trickling down to those doing the work. Many say they've been promised about £300 a month, but after paying the recruitment agency fee, they're left with barely a quarter that amount. They say they're trapped and can't leave without their employer's permission. To protect them, we can't show their faces.
I
have to support my parents, my wife and a child. It's not enough. I deeply regret ever coming here, but I can't leave. The company have my passport.
Imran is from Bangladesh and is employed by a subcontractor company doing work for the British construction company Carillion. He says he wasn't told he'd have to work in temperatures up to 50 degrees or for 11-hour days, 6 days a week.
We wake at 4 in the morning, get to work at about 6 and work until 5 in the evening. It takes an hour to get back to the camp. My room there isn't fit for humans. 6 of us share and there is no place even to sit and eat.
Carillion told us that the company employing Imran provides labour to one of its subcontractors and that they would investigate our findings immediately. When the day shift ends at 5, we follow buses that take workers to camps up to 20 miles from the city. We follow one to a camp used by another subcontractor working for Carillion. People have been arrested for talking to migrant workers in Qatar. We had to be quick.
I'm telling you, salaries don't get paid on time. The agency would tell us that the company hasn't got the money and so our salaries would be delayed.
Do you have your own passport with you?
आपके पास अपना passport है?
None of us gets to keep our passports. I don't know why.
The men here say they get £150 a month, with £40 extra for food.
What can a poor man do? I need to earn money.
Although hired by subcontracting companies, these men have no doubt who they ultimately work for.
I am working for Carillion. When I am on the construction site, I don't get safety glasses or gloves. My finger was nearly chopped off while working. I never got compensation and I had to pay for treatment.
Have you had an industrial accident? I wanted to ask how this man had broken his leg, but 2 men burst into the room.
Any permission you have, please? Sir. Any permission you have inside the camp? Any permission you have?
They threatened to take the camera, and we were thrown out of the camp.
Permission you have inside the camp? Any permission you have? My superior also same like asking for.
Carillion say that health and safety is at the very heart of our business, and practice on site follows standards that we apply in the UK. Our subcontractors must abide by Qatari law in respect of wages, living conditions and employment rights, and should comply with that law which prevents employers withholding passports. New workers' camps are being built. This one for Carillion workers who are employed directly by the company. Old-style camps are being replaced, but critics like Amnesty International say that these small changes to living conditions are only tinkering with the wider migrant worker problem. The Emir himself said earlier this year that he was personally hurt by the bad publicity Qatar was getting for its workers' conditions and that there would be change. But clearly the situation suits the government and too many international companies because labour reforms are taking place painfully slowly. Friday is a day off, and after prayers, workers who have been paid send money home. Late pay can be a disaster. Their families might have to take out crippling loans. I meet another batch of workers employed by a variety of local and international companies. Their main complaint is about paying the recruitment agencies.
70,000
Nepali rupees you had to pay. And how long did it take you to pay back? 70,000 Nepali rupees is £400.
1 year.
1 year?
Yeah.
Nearly all complain about pay and living conditions.
I have to send money back home to my mother, father, sister and brother. It's impossible for me to survive on what I'm earning.
18-year-old Krishna tells me he hates where he lives and invites me to come and take a look, so long as we use a small camera so as not to get him into trouble. In the camp, where Krishna is the youngest, there's a communal kitchen where some 30 men take turns and a foul-smelling washroom with 1 shower and 3 toilets. 8 men share a squalid room. They tell me there's no outlet for grievances. Trade unions are not allowed, and workers who go on strike are threatened with deportation. Since the discovery of gas reserves here just 20 years ago, Qatar has become one of the richest countries in the world and has been severely criticized for what Amnesty calls its callous indifference to migrant workers. Professor Ray Joradeni has been employed by the Qatari government to recommend improvements. He says that recruitment must be regulated and international companies should get more involved.
So when they draw on that stock of labour, they don't ask, they don't feel they need to ask, how were they recruited? In other words, what were the conditions? Were they trafficked? Are they caught in debt bondage? Are they being exploited? They don't need to ask that question. So I call this a corporate veil, that they just deal with the labour supply company, right? And it's as if the worker is not even there, they're not even there on their books.
What makes you think your recommendations will be implemented?
There are plenty of guidelines, plenty of critics, plenty of recommendations, all of whom pretty much agree with one another of what needs to be done. But then the Qataris have to make up their own mind about what is actually possible, given their own history and culture and economic circumstances.
The sound and sight of building dominates Doha, although Qataris don't do manual labour. Those who work for the government. A starting salary could be £6,000 a month. A labourer here earns 3% of that sum. It would be unfair to suggest that Qatar is doing nothing about the plight of the migrant worker. Here at the swanky 2022 offices, I meet the head of workers' welfare and asked what she thought of those who say Qatar shouldn't have the World Cup.
I think there are people that might say, oh, because of human rights abuses, you should take the World Cup away, for example. But I think that actually defeats the purpose. If the whole idea or the aim is to actually improve conditions, then why would you take such a great opportunity, a catalyst for change, away from the country? Because that will actually hamper the progress that's being made. They need to provide catered meals.
She proudly shows me the new regulations covering 1,500 labourers currently working on World Cup-only projects, like stadiums. But they're 0.1% of the total workforce. What about the remaining 1.5 million working on other projects?
I can't speak to that project because it's not under our direct oversight, but they, at a minimum, do fall under the labor law, and that is what should be implemented and enforced.
But under that law, workers can't leave Qatar, whatever their grievance, without their employer's consent. It is, in effect, forced labor. And yet, despite all that is known about Qatar's treatment of its migrant workforce, the sporting community keeps awarding the country its plum prizes. The World Cup in 2022, and only a few weeks ago it was announced that the international athletic competitions will be held here as well in 2019. But the main blame must go to those companies who ignore proper health and safety regulations. I'm reminded of the ultimate price that workers here might have to pay by Mahendra from Nepal, who works for a Qatari company.
A lot of workers die because here in Qatar we are working on tall buildings, and so the workers fall off and die. 14 or 15 people have died where I work.
Back in Nepal, the body of the dead construction worker is received by his family. He was paid £140 a month and was supporting his parents, his wife and 2 daughters. The cause of death is disputed. Nearly half the deaths of Nepalis are put down to heart attacks because, say the critics, no compensation need be paid. 10% of the deaths are suicide. Tens of thousands more workers will arrive in Qatar over the next 8 years to complete the building program. How many more will end up on the pyre of profit?